I have with me this afternoon my colleague, Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, Senator Franklin Can, and we will start off by him addressing you all.
Ladies and gentlemen of the media, the national population also. I just want to give you an update on the whole evolution of the Petrotrin matter as it relates to the formation of new companies and how they will become operationalized and what it will be the whole system of its operation. As we stated earlier, and as I stated in particular during my budget presentation, a new holding company has been formed. That company is called Trinidad Petroleum Holding Company Limited. So that will be the holding company at the top. There will be 4 subsidiaries. The first subsidiary will be Petrotrin, and Petrotrin will be there only to deal with legacy matters that will continue to be on the table for some years to come. The second major subsidiary, and probably what is the most important one, is the new E&P company, which is called Heritage Petroleum Company Limited. The third company is called Pariah Fuel Trading Company Limited, and that will be the trading and marketing arm, trading and marketing company of the new organization. And finally, and I think we're announcing this for the first time, the fourth company will be Garakara Refining Company. And I will just explain the process henceforth. The E&P assets, we're now working on a vesting order. The E&P assets will be transferred to Heritage Petroleum. That is the offshore Trinidad acreage, the land acreage, and all the assets that are involved in exploration and production. the assets of the terminal and the port and the pier will be transferred to Pariah Fuel Trading Company, and that process is well underway. And finally, the assets of the refinery will be put into a company called Garakara Refining Company Limited, and that is the company the Prime Minister referred to that will be seeking opportunity attention for the refinery. In addition, there will be an assignment of the E&P licenses, which is now currently under the name of Petrotrin at the Ministry of Energy, and there would be a deed of assignment to assign the new licenses to the Heritage Petroleum Company Limited. Very importantly, and you've been hearing fictitiously that we have a buyer for the refinery and it's been sold to this one and that one and the other one and the 1% and what have you. There's absolutely no truth in that statement. When the Garakara Refining Company becomes operational, very shortly, we will be putting out a very broad-based request for proposal from the entire international market. And there will also be a data room at the Point-of-Peer refinery so that interested parties could come, view the data, view the plans, and then make reasonable proposal to the state. The proposals, as I said, will be very broad-based. We're not telling you what to propose. You are free to propose any business model you want. Whether you want to purchase the refinery, whether you want to lease the refinery, whether you want to have a processing agreement, whether you have a source of crude, whether you have a new business model, everything will be open for discussion. And at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, we feel that we will get a proposal that will be acceptable to the government, where we will no longer have this albatross of our neck called a refinery, but however, the assets can still be utilized in a productive way for the benefits of Trinidad and Tobago. This entire transformation process is well on its way. It's going pretty smoothly. Obviously, like anything else of this magnitude, there will be hitches here and there, but by and large, it is going smoothly. The new companies, we hope to have them operationalized by the end of this year. And all things being equal, 2019 will be a brand new year for the energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Khan. I'd just like to clarify one issue when Minister Khan said it will become operational. That is the Guara.
Yeah.
We don't mean that the refinery is going to be operating. That it's just the refinery assets are being placed in this special purpose vehicle for the purposes of the government receiving proposals, and as he said, as broad-based as they can possibly be, which will then be evaluated and a decision taken. And we have no horse in the race. We wait to see what comes in, and then a determination would be made. At this stage, we invite any questions you all may have.
How do you respond to people who say that this whole process was not done very transparently, because people opened the newspapers and just saw that there were these two companies registered, and you did not intimate this in your budget contribution?
Yes, I did, ma'am. The only company I did not announce in my budget presentation was the third company, which is the Karakara Refining Company Limited. If you go back to the Hansard, you will see I mentioned by name the Trinidad Petroleum Holding Company Limited. I mentioned Nuco 1, which is an exploration and production company, Nuco 2, which is a marketing and terminaling arm, and I mentioned Nuco 3, which will be a refining company. We're now disclosing the names with you all, and the companies have been registered, and the process continues.
Let me just add to that. Let me just add to that, because this narrative that is trying to be sold about transparency is completely false. What has happened, and it's a distortion, because what has happened is in January 2017, the Prime Minister came and alerted the country, because by then a proper assessment had been done as to the dire straits that Petrotrin was in and what effects it could have on the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Thereafter, Cabinet took a decision, appointed a committee headed by then P.S. Lashley, that's known as the Lashley Committee. They produced a report. Thereafter, the Cabinet appointed a new board chaired by Wilfred Espinay and a number of other professionals, and gave them the mandate to look at this thing called Petrotrin and come back to government as to whether it can be viable, whether it can't be viable, what are the options, etc. That process took place, and at every step we said, look, this is what is going on. When a decision was finally taken, the union was called in. The union was told by none less than the Prime Minister and the Minister of Energy that, listen, an assessment has taken place, you all were invited to participate in it, and this is what has happened. The board will now discuss with you all how we go forward. The union then met with the board the following Tuesday, and it was told to them, but the Prime Minister did tell Mr. Ansel Roger and the other members of the union that were there that the refinery is going to be shut down because it is no longer viable, etc. For people now to come and say, and we said there's a restructuring exercise taking place, Minister Khan at the first opportunity, and I think the Prime Minister had referred to it before, talked about the setup of how a new company would look with a holding company, new cos, and this type of thing. Then the names, there's a process for the incorporation of companies. You have to have approvals of names, etc. That's a legal process. When that was done, Minister Khan has provided the information, etc. There is no issue of any lack of transparency in the whole process. One thing I'd like to say, and I was just trying to get an update, as you all are aware, there's a matter currently before the Court of Appeal. It hasn't finished as yet. My understanding is the union's lawyer is now responding to the state and the Petrotrin's arguments that would have been made during the course of this morning. So for all of these allegations as to lack of transparency, etc., it is a very complex process that is taking place to restructure something like Petrotrin, to get the advice and then to implement the advice. It is an ongoing process. And as Minister Khan says, there are things that may come up that you don't foresee or you don't know what the outcome would be. For example, the court matter. The union has brought a matter. The union one day thought they were ahead. The next day the Court of Appeal overturned and granted a stay of an injunction, etc. So at every step of the way, the information is being provided.
The company was registered on that same day, not so? The what you call it, the heritage?
Yes, but I didn't call Heritage by name. I was aware of the holding company, and I called the three subsidiaries, Nuco 1, Nuco 2, Nuco 3, because we were still checking as the,
Well, it had to get
it had
approval.
to get
The
approval. I
Registrar
cannot give
General
you a
has to
name.
give
The
the
Registrar
approval,
General's
correct.
office has to do that, and I mentioned that the fourth subsidiary will be Petrotrin, and it will deal with legacy matters.
Yeah, but Mr. Khan, you can understand, Mr. Leon, you can understand that regardless of everything you just said, you have advertised the companies without informing the public of the name. Why couldn't you just tell us the names of the company
And
before putting out the advertisement?
well, hold on. The advertisements came out a day or two, if I remember correctly, after Minister Cannon announced, as Ria has just pointed out, the approval for the registration of the names and the incorporation under those names came out on the same day that Minister Khan was making his presentation. So what is it that you're asking? Why the government didn't come out and say heritage? And
Yes,
let me ask you this one question. And what is the harm that has been done by you not knowing the name of Heritage and Paria, and then an advertisement which is public showing these are two new companies that have been formed, and this is the information for each company as to what it is they're going to do.
And let
The
me just,
purpose of the advertisements is to provide the information.
no, let me just make one point here, please. Communication doesn't, from the government and from the entities that operating this matter is not always what the minister says. The advertisement was a legitimate advertisement. We told you what the names were. So it doesn't mean because the minister didn't personally hold a press conference or send out a press release that communication was not done.
The advertisement was a nice package that appeared one day by surprise without a statement of principles, a statement that showed that there was a commitment and a real plan forward for this transformation, for this
Well,
restructuring.
that was
So it
the
seemed as
subject
though
of
that
my
there was
budget presentation.
packaging.
If you listen it properly, I went to step by step, showed you what the major timelines were, when certain things will kick in. I talk about when the first importation of products will take place. I talk about when the first crude export will take place.
The
Company
next day we would see an
identity.
advertisement.
Okay, well, hold on. At that stage, when the minister was making his presentation, there was not as yet the approval of the names and the incorporation of the companies. One way that you tell the public that something is taking place is via an advertisement. An advertisement, these are companies that have now been formed. The advertisement says what the companies are there for. Minister Khan had given a prelude that companies are being set up for specific purposes, and these are what the purposes of the company are. So I'm really failing to understand what is the grievance. I'm failing to understand what is the harm, because the way you're behaving is as though there's some harm that has taken place. What is the harm that has taken place? You're saying that after the minister did his budget presentation and before public advertisements came out, and they've actually been commended for their advertisements that came out and said, these are the two companies and this is what they're going to do. And by the way, please make your applications for employment in these companies here. You're saying that in that intervening one-day period, the government should have come out and said, the presentation that Minister Khan has spoken about, and he said the setup, the names of the companies that are approved are Paria and Heritage, and you will see an advertisement appearing in the newspapers tomorrow.
Buy-in into these corporate identities, along with the commitment that this is going to be done differently. So to kind of cold turkey introduce it in a nicely packaged way.
But I don't understand the cold turkey concept. So you wanted us to have like a presentation with two billboards saying, pull a curtain down and say, this is Heritage and this is Paria.
That's the point. It seems like you're imposing this on the public without informing them. People, it's a sensitive
But
matter.
imposing what?
You're imposing
The
a
names
new
of
company.
companies?
Yes, it's a restructuring of something that's
But
very
hold on,
sensitive.
hold on, Ms. Bridgelal. You're not imposing anything. The minister in his budget presentation
Indicated.
said this is how this entity is being restructured. Did you listen to his presentation? He said there are going to be 3 new companies, a holding company, and then 4 new companies, a holding company, Newco 1, Newco 2, Newco 3. He said what those new companies are being set up for. He said and explained what is the purpose of it, that this is part of the restructuring. Your complaint and your allegation that there's high-handedness is that he did not name the companies. But they weren't at that stage already registered.
Okay, but following up on
This matter is in court and these people are dreading collecting termination letters, and bam, there's these advertisements for all these vacancies in the papers that the government is just going ahead with their plans.
First of all, nobody has been forced to collect any letter. In fact, what you all, the media, have reported, and my understanding, it might be accurate reporting, is persons have been going to collect their letters. It was stated from early o'clock by both Minister Khan and Petrotrin that all workers are going to be terminated. The injunction that was granted in the industrial court to the workers, or to the union rather, as the representative of the workers, and not all the workers, but just their bargaining units, was an injunction that said you can't terminate and you can't provide VSEP. The company abided by that. The Court of Appeal, which is the highest court in those circumstances, then said, look, the industrial court was wrong to grant the injunction and stayed the injunction. In law and in the process, because you're trying to achieve certain deliverables, the company then went ahead and delivered letters. They didn't force anybody, but what the point I'm making is, at the outset, it was made very, very clear that every single worker will be parting ways with the entity known as Petrotrin.
Time frame for hiring a lot of senior positions for those two, for Paria and Heritage. Give anyone any comfort that the recruitment process is going to find new, fresh people who are not in the old mold, that we are going to get at the top the people who will bring the transformation and restructuring and transparency that have been promised with
the
this.
1 week process is not the recruitment. The 1 week process was to submit your application. There will now be a robust interview process with experts, both human resource experts and industry experts. So the panel will be for the exploration company, exploration and production experts, human resource experts, whatever expertise that a modern recruitment process demands is going to be put in place.
For resumes for such high-level key positions.
Well, I can't answer that specifically in the context of the Petrotrin and the people who are running it, make these decisions. But I see no real big issue with that, because somebody who is on the market always has a resume prepared.
All right, let me...
I don't think that, it's sort of same circle of
Well, hold on. Let me address that as well from a legal...
Well,
from a legal point of view. What you've seen take place, as was pointed out by both the Prime Minister previously and then the Minister clarifying in his budget presentation, is a restructuring of a very complex entity. There is absolutely nothing unusual or untoward for the incorporation of a company that you utilize. Company law says you have to have a minimum of 2 directors. To incorporate a company, you have to have a minimum of 2 directors. So the persons who were mandated by the cabinet to restructure Petrotrin is a new board. And what you've had is the chairman and the deputy chairman in the incorporation of the new entities that will form this new entities that will form this new package under a holding company, putting themselves as the directors of these companies. What you look at is the shareholding. The shareholding will be the corporation's sole, as is to be expected. But there is nothing untoward of the same directors. What did you expect? Different directors to be utilized? These are the people who are driving a process that is not yet completed. Yeah. They're in the process of completing a restructuring of Petrotrin. But they are not new directors. The directors of Petrotrin, it is the chairman and the deputy chairman who are the incorporating directors of the new entities that now form part of what existed before.
Well, please understand that I don't understand.
Well, that's obvious.
Yeah, well, and that's why I'm asking you to explain.
And I've just explained it.
Not very clearly.
But they
and
have to go through a process of reappointing these people, or is it that they just put themselves as the...
No, they were authorized to so do. The 2 directors are just under the Companies Act for incorporation purposes only. I can give you the assurance that when this thing unfolds a little further, when we have to fully man the three subsidiaries. The boards will be expanded, and it will include people of serious skill sets in the respective operations of the various companies.
Did they have to get new instruments of appointment?
You don't have, in a private company, no, there are no instruments of appointment. You mean that the Minister of Finance now writes saying that you are the chairman and well, correct, and that is the process that is taking place.
Write something.
That is the process that is taking place. This is very fast moving. There was the incorporation.
This.
But
If
to
the Minister
what?
of Finance had to go through the thing of writing and saying, these are the directors of the companies, that why was it that in your contribution, for example, all of this, we get in this drip information. Why is it we weren't told, here's what, when we set it up, the Minister of Finance is going to put these two people as the chairman of, or the members
As in two
of the
directors. They're simply directors of the new entities. So the chairman and the deputy chairman are going to be the incorporating directors of the new entities. All right, we fall on our sword for not saying that before.
Responsibility for the perception that Petrotrin, in conjunction with the government, has collectively fallen down over the last 2 months and communicating clearly, step by step, in as much as you've admitted that this is fast moving and some of this changes, that it's coming in piece by piece. So there are a lot of holes.
But there was always the court matter that constrained us to a point. And then let me just make another point. Look today, the most important thing I have said, and nobody has asked me any question, is the new refining company. There will be a major request for proposal, and there will be a big data room in Pointe-à-Pierre, where the request for proposal will be very broad-based, and we will be accepting all different types of proposal in terms of different business models and different operation strategy to recommence the refinery operation under a different model. And you all didn't see that as that is the biggest statement I've made today, because everybody knew what Paria, everybody knew what Heritage.
That's easy to understand. Everything else
That's your perception. We will have different perceptions of what.
All right. Let me answer your question about communication. From the time this process started and the announcement was made that there's going to be a major restructuring of Petrotrin, the Prime Minister led that charge initially, as you would recall, with a specific address to the nation as the decisions that have taken place, and that was not that long ago. I'm trying to remember the date. I believe it was in September, where the Prime Minister came out and told the population, we have now reached a decision as to what will happen with Petrotrin. And it was quite a long address to the nation, and he laid that groundwork. What immediately thereafter followed was the Minister of Energy, a number of other ministers, going on various talk shows, etc., talking about it, a public meeting in Marabella where the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Energy, and the Prime Minister again provided all of the information at that stage. And for a while, within that week, the Prime Minister and the various ministers provided what information was available at that stage. The board of directors, Mr. Espinay, in fact, one of the criticisms was that he was talking at all these various forum, etc., and they were providing information. The board of directors of Petrotrin has had a media conference where they've come out and they've said, look, this is what is happening. As it is happening, the information is being provided. This thing, as I said, is very fluid. We've come here today, first post-cab, even though we're still in the budget debate, to address the Petrotrin issue. The Prime Minister went on the radio in the middle of the budget debate last week, Thursday, if I remember correctly, and addressed Petrotrin. At every single stage, we are providing all of the information that we can provide. If there is a belief that sufficient information hasn't been provided at certain points, I'll accept that. That exactly as Ria has just said, is the perception and the belief of various people that not enough information has been provided. But what I can tell you is if you do a fact check and you go and look at the record starting in January 2017, this administration at every step when a decision has been made has come out and said this is what is happening, this is what is going on. And I would challenge you all to say, if the argument is, well, when you're making your budget debate presentation, and as that stage that the minister was making it, the companies had not yet been given the approval for the incorporation and use of those names, but he said, this is what is going to happen. And they're saying, well, one day passed, and then next thing we saw are ads with the announcement via ads of the new companies and what they're going to do. Nothing can be done about that now.
Does it undermine government's attempt to get public buy-in into this maneuver that, yes, you may be in the media every week, every other day, but that the information comes in so piecemeal that it is not clear on occasion 1 and occasion 2, and it takes until occasion 3, 4, and 5 for it to be clear. And then you get the whole picture, and that's becoming, because in terms of your timeline, we heard on the 28th, no one's interested in this refinery. It has no viability. No one would want to bother. By the time the PM comes to give the address, we're hearing, well, it would be open to a buyer like the OWTU and so on. So
well, there's a massive plant that exists there. A request for proposals is exactly that. The government has no prediction. The government has no fixed plan at this stage as to what can be done for the refinery. It could be somebody coming to buy it, pick it up, take it elsewhere. It could be somebody coming to say, look, I have a source of crude. Who knows? And that's why you have an RFP to see what can happen with respect to that. And that stage of the refinery. What we're saying, and no one is saying that there's viability of the refinery at this stage. Because what we were told, it continuing as it is, it cannot be viable commercially going forward. You all would recall the immediate injection of $7 billion to just get the plant and equipment and machinery in a state that it can continue at the refinery. The figure of $25 billion to keep that operation going, etc. So whoever's going to come with a proposal, those are the elements that they need to look at. An evaluation of those proposals will then take place and a decision. And at this stage, it is very, very premature, and it'll be pure speculation as to what proposal eventually can be a proposal if, in fact, one of those proposals are going to be viable going forward.
Will the nature of the information undermine your attempt to get public buy-in into this?
Absolutely not, because I'm quite surprised to hear you say that there has been no public buy-in to the whole Petrotrin process, because I personally have not seen that. In fact, a lot of the public has said this is something that needed to be done for a long time. They've commended the Prime Minister and the government for having the strength to take it on. And let me remind you all, there is a massive, and this will be part of what I'm sure is taking place in court right now, there is a massive piece of the puzzle you all haven't raised that is missing here. If this was not done with Petrotrin, it had the potential to collapse the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, because you still have the bond payments that are outstanding, and you have all these other things that are taking place. And there is a domino effect, that if you didn't deal with Petrotrin, it could affect your international sovereign ratings that can then have cross-default clauses. So if there was another downgrade because of Petrotrin, it can trigger a lot of sovereign debt. Interest rates could go up, or, as had happened with the last downgrade, there was a Japanese bank that called in a 7-day period, because of a downgrade of the country based on Petrotrin, $200 million. So the government had to find $200 million in a 7-day period. We asked them for further 7 days. Fine. Fortunately, they gave us 14 days because of a downgrade of our sovereign rating, because of the state of Petrotrin. There was a call-in of one loan for $200 million. If there's a further downgrade of our sovereign rating because of Petrotrin and not dealing with it, God alone knows what could have happened in those circumstances. And I really believe that all of the civic and right-minded citizens of Trinidad and Tobago actually support that decision. And you would have seen it. There was some litmus tests along the way. I'll take your minds back. There was a call for a day of rest and reflection. It did not happen. There were marches taking place. They did not have the level of support. And that is not through any threat or intimidation or anything of the government, because we did no such thing. That is the people of Trinidad and Tobago thinking that the government has done the right thing in dealing with the Petrotrin issue now, even though it is a very difficult issue. And there's a lot of emotion running, and the government is very empathetic to those who are affected. But at the end of the day, you take a difficult decision. 3,000 to 5,000 workers, we have to find a way to have them treated with fairly, as opposed to bringing down the whole economy of Trinidad and Tobago.
I accept your point that felt that something had to be done about Petrotrin. The problem, I think, and I think the problem I think that we have been trying to put forward is that the details of how this would be done, okay, something has to be done about Petrotrin, we all agree. The details of how it would be done was where I think the government fell short. I mean, for example, we were told that the refinery was shutting down. But Petrotrin, right, but then we had this confusion as to whether the entire body of workers would be affected, because we heard 1,700, then we heard 2,600, then we heard 4,700, then we heard, so there was this contradiction in some of the working out of those details, and that is where you lost the public sympathy in that sense, because people felt that, okay, we agree that this is happening, but every time we looked, there were different pieces of information, sometimes not in matching each other, from the government, from the company, and you had each other saying, all. So I mean, there was too much of that, and that is what I'm talking about, where if we're going to have an advertisement or we're doing something, tell the public, give us a proper timeline and a chart of what is going to happen, but not just expect us to go on, okay, well, Petrotrin losing money and we have to do something. Whatever you do, we ain't care. Because that is not the position of the public.
So there's a complaint that the communication was not perfect. Accepted. All right, because in every instance, they're going to be, in hindsight, this could have been done differently, that could have been done differently, this could have been done better. But I can tell you, from a principled point of view, this administration has made it very clear, from the Prime Minister driving it, that all of the information that can be provided to the public has to be provided to the public. The Prime Minister himself led the charge. He has done 2 national addresses to the nation, only and solely on Petrotrin. That shows you the importance it plays. If there's a complaint that we have gotten, as Fane said, is too piecemeal, etc., I can understand why there's that perception. But the truth is that it is very fluid. As soon as the information can be provided, is being provided. I hear what you say, that initially the first statement talked about 1,700 permanent workers, and then later on 3,200, etc., etc. Again, if there were errors there, fall on the sword for it. Yeah. But I know that at every stage what can be provided has been provided, and that charge has been led by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Energy and other ministers. We've had Minister West, Minister Lahan go out and talk about it on the talk shows, etc., both on radio and on television. And this is an ongoing process. There was a termination process taking place, the handing out of letters. An injunction was granted. You then have to, okay, well, how do you deal with this now? And there's a continuum of pressing ahead with the other things. The refinery is being shut down. There's not a restart up of the refinery. We're saying it's being put, the assets of the refinery, into a specific purpose vehicle. We've told you now the name. Now that the name is known, we've told you there's going to be an RFP process where the world, anybody in the world that wants to put in a proposal as to what they think should be done with that, can put in a proposal. It'll be properly evaluated. At that stage, we'll come, you say, look, this is the number of proposals that are received, this is the evaluation team's going to look at it, this is the time frame that they will look at it, and then we expect to make a decision thereafter. Can something happen that slows that process down? I'm sure it can. There are always uncertainties that you have to deal with.
So don't do what you were doing from the start. You weren't making it up.
No, of course not. You don't do something as complex and as complicated by this. On the hoof, it has been very, very structured. You've heard the Prime Minister say, this was not a decision that was made easily. When the board came and presented to a subcommittee of cabinet, we sent them back saying, go and look at this, go and look at that. And that process took 18 months, came to a decision, the refinery has to be shut down. The rest of Petrotrin exploration, the provision of fuels and bunkering, etc., those may be viable matters going forward. So that is how it would be restructured.
And let me just come in here on another point, that the communication. There are certain aspects of this process that the best people to communicate that to the public and to the media is the board of Petrotrin. then there will be another level of issues that probably the best person to communicate that would be the Minister of Energy. And in some cases, the corporation sold. And in certain very strategic decisions, the Prime Minister will intervene and he will make a statement. So there's a sort of hierarchy of communication. So I don't want you to interpret that if a minister doesn't say something, then there's no communication, because Petrotrin has been in the media very regularly indicating as far as possible what the process involves and what is taking place.
And to build on that point, it reminds me exactly the point that Minister Khanna said. You have different tiers of communications, different persons who are going to deliver different messages. As soon as this issue arose as to what is heritage, what is Paria, you had Miss Lisa Ali, who is the person assisting and driving the whole change and implementation of the restructuring plan at Petrotrin. She went on television last week and said, look, this is what is going on, etc., etc. And that was, she had done it prior, I believe, with Nigel Edwards and Wilfred Espinay in their media conference.
RFP that you all had put out? Have you found a supplier?
For imported fuels, well, that's Petrotrin, my understanding, and there are no issues there. All the timelines that we indicated is on schedule in terms of the importation of fuel and the timeline for the export of our first shipment of crude, which will be in a 500,000 barrel a day package.
You see, and how we need to be careful, you just said that you put out the RFP. The RFP was put out by Petrotrin. Petrotrin is in the process, and the new entities of carrying that business forward. There has been, give them credit where credit is due. There has been actually no hiccup, knock on wood, at all, in spite of all that is going on in the supply of fuel at the pumps.
When you go out for spot market purchases, that is a bid. So they will have proposals coming in. You have to be sensitive with bidded information. They have to evaluate it. We just can't tell you who is the supplier off the cuff just like that. What is the price we're paying? You're jeopardizing your commercial position in the market.
Petrotrin hasn't yet.
New entity, Paria.
Oh God, I'm confused. Can we call it Petrotrin just for now? Yeah. Petrotrin has not yet secured a buyer. Just want a supplier. Just want to clarify.
Yes, they are very, very closely there already. And I just want to give the assurance to the country at this point in time that there will be a seamless transition of the supply of liquid fuels to the market, to the suppliers of LPG, and to the suppliers of bitumen.
To ask you, there's a rumor that there has already been a shipment from a PDVSA refinery headed to Trinidad, and that has been who Petrotrin has secured as their supplier. Can you comment on that? Confirm, deny?
I know nothing of that. I was never informed of anything like that.
I would be very surprised if that is anything above a rumor, because when we were in Venezuela recently and you were on the trip, they themselves have difficulty in supplying their domestic market with fuels at the pump, etc.
And you will hear all sorts of rumors in an environment like this. Huh?
Okay, well, that explains it.
The first shipment of imported shipment of products was, at least on this timeline I have, it was carried for the 17th of October. I'm not sure, whether there's a little delay,
I think they just sent that.
Or what have you.
May I ask, what's the source of that information, that rumor? Who's the source of that?
Yes.
Huh?
It came from an opposition source.
Or Mr. Devon Maraj? I wouldn't treat that as a very credible source of information.
Or deny as necessary.
Just to go back, you said that there's been no hiccup, but then the due date for the first shipment was today.
Yesterday then, yeah. Yesterday was the 17th.
Oh, yeah.
Well, these are predictions. It's a market, it's a delivery. We have a buffer of 20 days, irrespective of whether there's a little lapse in bringing in the first shipment. So I wouldn't take that to mean everything. If I said the 17th, it comes.
Well, I could give you the up-to-date, well, hold on. Let me give you the up-to-date information. The first product shipment is expected between the 22nd to the 24th of October. The first crude export, meaning the export we're sending, will be on October 30th to November 1st.
24th.
22nd to the 24th.
Well,
The first product
Import, as the
shipment.
first import.
So then, does that imply that we have a supplier if we can?
As Minister
We have
Khan just said.
20 days supply without the importation.
Listen, the contingency planning that went into this exercise, I really want to commend all of those who participated in it, because obviously one of the things that was looked at is ensuring that there was sufficient supply for, as Minister Khan said, there to be a seamless transition. And that was done on the Petrotrin side, the NP side, etc., and they're to be commended for that. So there is no shortage. There is, and as I've just told you, these are fixed, these are set dates now, the 22nd of October. That is, I believe, next week. And we have over 28 days supply as it currently stands.
Export. So is Petrotrin / Heritage still producing right as it is now?
Well, yes, the
Oil,
well
yes.
zone shut off. They still produce 40-something thousand barrels of oil per day.
And we can tell you all that what we've been informed, the price that we're fetching, because again, one of these sources of distorted information was saying that there's no market for the sale of the Trinidadian crude. I'm happy to say, and Minister Khan can bear me out here, the initial market for our crude is actually above WTI pricing. So whereas we suspected it may have been a little below, it is actually above. So the contracts that are being entered into for the sale of our crude are above world WTI pricing.
Or what hemisphere of the world?
What region?
No, it's a spot market sale. So they had bidders from, I think, 7 or 8 bidders. We cannot give you them by name, and everybody will build a price. But what Minister Young is saying, and the information I also have, is that the prices are very, very attractive. And as a matter of fact, it is even higher than we thought the crude was worth.
Correct.
Can you tell us who our agent is? So Paria is the market, they're the marketer, they're the ones selling the product
Directly?
on the open market, or do we have an agent on the commodities trade?
No, well, you see, the transition has not been completed as yet, so there's still Petrotrin, because remember the crude eventually will belong to Heritage when the vesting order takes place, and when the license has been assigned from Petrotrin to Heritage. So all these are procedural things that will take a couple of weeks and months to happen again. So don't jump ahead of yourself.
Just clarifying that right now, as it stands, everything with producing and also marketing petroleum is still under Petrotrin,
because our vesting order has not been done as yet.
Okay, great.
But you expect the first import to be the 22nd to the 24th. So between now and the next 4 to 6
Well,
days.
I think by definition, the information I've just provided you, which is the information Petrotrin has just provided, means there is a supplier. All right? If we know that there's going to be a shipment arriving on 22nd to 24th, don't go now and try and turn it as, oh, you're going to secure a supplier in the next 7 days for this. The answer is, I am sure that they have already secured a supplier to provide it with the days of 22nd.
Close. So I was just clarifying. If I could broaden the conversation, if I don't know if you all have exhausted the Petrotrin thing, but Minister, as Minister of National Security, you may not be aware because you've been with us for the last 45 minutes, but UE has a security situation where police have been called to the campus because students are up in arms over the security and safety concerns and admin's response there. Do you have any information on that,
No, I
or
don't.
anything that you can say given their concerns about robberies and assault?
No, I don't. I don't have any specifics apart from what I saw reported in today's newspaper, that there is a concern about some criminal activity that has taken place, and in particular, with respect to some of the students at UE, I was very concerned when I saw that, and that is something that obviously needs to be addressed. I mean, as you would be aware, the UE campus is private property, and UE has its own estate constable system, and they have their own private security. But I will ensure in a conversation with the Commissioner of Police that whatever support we can give from the national security apparatus will be given, because crime is something, as I've said many times before, that affects any citizen that it affects is of concern to me. So whatever support the police can give in those arrangements, I'm sure that they will give. But no, I'm not aware of what you've just alerted me to. But I will find out about it.
Shift of the day at MSP that there were about 26 reported absences. Did that request from the prison's executive ever come into the ministry for reinforcements today?
When I, very early this morning, and I smile at your figure because you have one above what I have, I asked for the statistics on what was happening today. You focused on MSP. What I'm happy to say is on our Port of Spain prisons and all of the other areas, and even the MSP of 25, I was told 25, if you say it's 26 prison officers calling in sick, it did not affect the day-to-day operations at any of the prison systems. In my conversations up to late last night with the prison executive, they had put in place contingency plans internally, so there was no need for any external assistance. But I gave the assurance that if they needed any external assistance, it is something that we would work on. We started off this week before this very tragic incident meeting. Every week I meet with the heads of security and we have very open discussions. And one of the second item on the agenda was the prison system, because as you all are aware, a couple of weeks ago, we took a decision to have an interagency plan put in place. So I wanted an update on that. I wanted to know what was going on in the prison system, all of the specifics, etc. So there were already plans in place. I've seen the very emotional outburst that took place yesterday and the questions as to what is being done. The truth is there were already things in place, and I can understand the emotions that ran yesterday because it is very tragic, and if one of your colleagues is killed in those circumstances, it is going to affect you. So the systems are running and they're going to be strengthened over time. There are a number of initiatives that are in the pipeline and should be coming into place shortly.
Can you say if slain prison officers get compensation, the police, for example, get a $1 million, their families get?
There was a decision, I think, taken by the last administration that was left for $1 million compensation for an officer correct, slain in the line of duty. It then fell to us as an administration coming into place to set in the policy, etc. That was done. There is a policy in place, there's a document in place. Prison officers do fall under that policy. As to what the definitions, and I can't remember offhand, are for in the line of duty. But we were very careful in how that definition, and I remember the conversation that took place, for example, at FNGP at the time, because at the time you had the unfortunate incident of the prison officer up in, I believe, Movar, that was washing his vehicle, and he was murdered during the process of washing his vehicle. Does that fall in the line of duty? So what I can say is there is a policy in place. I can't remember the specifics of how we define in the line of duty and how these two incidents, the recent unfortunate incidents of prison officer Juan Francis, and before that the superintendent, how their particular cases fall. And I believe that I would have a part to play in that determination. So I don't want to say much more than that at this stage. My recollection is, yes, there have been some payments that were made pursuant to the policy.
But you know, one of the things the police association was upset about.
Prisons Association.
Sorry, they said that the meeting, you said that you'll meet them next Tuesday, and this is an emergency situation. How do you respond to that?
I have been in constant contact with both the prison, even before this incident, with both the prison association as well as the executive. In fact, I got the news yesterday morning from the prison commissioner, and then was speaking to the commissioner of police, and then spoke immediately with Mr. Sarah and Richards. And it was a very different type of conversation because we were planning something before, and I said, look, Sarah, I will come, when should I come? He said, look, things, and this is the conversation, things are very uncertain right now. At the time when we spoke, he had not even made his way to the maximum security prisoners yet, etc. He said, let me see how things are going. I said, look, I will come early next week, I can come on Tuesday next week. Let's agree that time now. And that was what was agreed. I can tell you all that as soon as I leave here, I'm going into a National Security Council meeting that has been called by the chairman of the National Security Council last night. And in speaking to me, asked me to put together a National Security Council meeting this afternoon at 3 o'clock. And the sole item on the agenda is for us to discuss what is taking place at the prisons. The prison officers may know or should know that I had already been in contact and in detail, and as I said on Monday, speaking to the other heads of security as to what are the plans and the implementation of specifics to deal with the prisons. So I understand that there's been criticism, but there has been a decision to change that or ask for an earlier date, and they know what I'm coming there to do. I was the one that volunteered for that meeting because I have no problem in going and speaking to the prison officers at any level whatsoever, any prison officer, hearing what it is they have to say and trying to work towards solutions. But the truth is that there is no flick of a switch solution in these circumstances.
What about some of the things they have suggested, such as being carrying firearms and having rooms?
That was a conversation that was already in train. As I told them yesterday, I don't want to divulge the specifics of what are the arrangements being put in place, because of course that then now in national security matters you're always balancing how much to talk about, how much particulars and how much to put out there, because you're dealing with criminal elements. That conversation I was tackling from 2 points of view, including not only the granting of FULs, which falls under the Commissioner of Police, but off-duty carrying of weapons and that type of thing. And that is being discussed and things are being put in place with respect to that.
Having them within a certain area?
The having within a certain area is a very difficult proposition. You have prison officers spread out all over. I mean, just look at the unfortunate last 2 incidents. One was in just south of Arima area, and then the next one is all the way in Princestown. Prison officers live all over the place. There are conversations that can take place with the Ministry of Housing if there's a particular officer in any of the law enforcement agencies, because I've had police officers come as well and they feel that they're at risk where they are, then we can have conversations with Ministry of Housing. But as you know, there are just not sufficient housing units available to just distribute in that manner. But it is part of a conversation, and it's a difficult situation, and I am open to listening to them as to what are some of the proposed solutions.
Also, a view that there might be some rogue element within the prison service which could complicate things, or that might be part of the reason for some of the threats. You have that?
I don't want to say that is part of the reason as to what has happened, but yes, there's no burying of head in the sand here. There are rogue elements not only in prison, in all of the various parts of our society, not only in law enforcement, etc. So yes, as you all have been seeing within recent times, some prison officers have been caught and have been charged. That's the difference. There's now a concerted effort or more focus and emphasis being placed that if there are corrupt elements within the prison service, let's find them and root them out. The same thing is taking place with the new Commissioner of Police in the police service. If there's information that there corruption is taking place in any of the law enforcement bodies, it is something we're going to deal with. That is a conversation I've specifically had with all of the heads of security, the Chief of Defense Staff, the Commissioner of Police, the Commissioner of Prisons, the Fire Service, all of them. And the Prime Minister himself has had that conversation with them as Chairman of the National Security Council. You have the government support. If there are corrupt elements in your entities and you need to weed them out, go ahead and do so. That's it?
Yeah.
Thank you all very much.